Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to Earwax. It's Colin, and thanks for joining us for a very special interview. We've got with Mr. Daniel Kleederman, singer, songwriter, guitarist. Thanks so much for being here, Dan.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So, if those of you that aren't familiar, Dan is the former lead guitarist and band leader for Bartees Strange, but he has now broken out on his own and has just released his debut solo album, Another Life. So let's just dive right in here. Get this question out of the way first. So you left a pretty steady gig with, I'd say, like one of the hottest names in indie right now. Was there ever like a moment of hesitation to break out on your own, or was this always the plan?
um, yes, and yes, in some ways, I would say, yeah. I mean, total hesitation, very difficult decision. Making process. I would say the hardest in my kind of professional career. But at the same time, I think, yeah, the yes part is that I think at a certain point in the process of just kind of working for an artist, um, which is different than I would say being in like a band as we say. They have their benefits and drawbacks and various things, but um I knew at some point I had been doing it for 4 to 5 years, and it's one of those things where it's like it's a part-time gig, but it is a full-time commitment ultimately when you're really cooking, when you're on the road a lot, but you're never on the road 12 months a year,
Yeah.
or you're not recording for months at a time. So it's one of those things where I think, more generally speaking, when I made some decisions in my life to like pursue music at the highest level that I could, along with doing some other things that I do, it's kind of like, well, it's this is it. So
Yeah.
what do you really, what's the full thing that you really want to do? And I recognized that I wanted to be able to give some focus to my what was really inside of me, what I had made, my own music, but also being able to play with other people too. I came up very much in the New York scene where I am now, and I got so used to playing so many different kinds of music that I think there's also just a part of me that loves to commit to things, but also wanted to be able to expand, and kind of stay fresh and alive in that sense. So it was just, there are so many things I could go into that are beyond, there's a lot we could talk about, but
Yeah.
for the sake of time, I think this is the best summary.
Cool, man. Well, yeah. I mean, I think it definitely the that speaks for itself. That you decided to take this endeavor, and the album is fantastic. So
I
I
appreciate
I
it.
I, I think it was clear that you had a lot to put out there and produce. So on that note,
Yeah.
obviously, you have a like I think your strongest background is in guitar, but there and the guitar on this album is really really good. But I think just the instrumentation in general is pretty well done throughout. What other instruments do you play, and how much of the album did you perform yourself, or did you have like some studio musicians come in and help out at certain parts?
Yeah. So I would say, well, the person that's coming to my mind was my co-producer and the person who really was in charge of the whole just technical production of the record, and much more. So his name is Chris Connors. He also has worked on Bartees stuff as well. Did co-production on Farm to Table and some stuff on horror as well. And he's been a friend of mine since college. The drummer on Another Life is Alex Goldberg, who has played with a lot of people, but also went to college with me and plays my band. And we played in so many things together over the years. But I would say Chris really just such a true producer to me, in that he has an amazing ability to play a lot of instruments, true multi instrumentalist. So a lot of the keyboard playing, I don't think I played any keyboards. Yeah, it was like, even though Chris also is kind of guitar and bass background, he played all the bass on the record except for Another Life. the song Another Life, where I there might be two basses on that song actually, but the kind of fuzz bass, very psych rock fuzz bass is me.
Okay.
But other than that, all the beautiful bass playing on the record is Chris. I'm such a fan of his bass playing, so I say that very authentically, earnestly. But keyboards, that's Chris. You know, various programming of other things. It was really a lot of Chris's multi-instrumental abilities. Most of the guitars are me, with a couple of exceptions actually. On A Knock at the Door, that's a moment, if you, once that song kind of like the drums and the bass enter, I think I'm guitar right, Chris is guitar left, and I think we may have tracked that together, but it's been a bit. I have to look back.
Cool, thanks, man. Yeah, I think you know, obviously the guitar work, like I said, is fantastic, but I think the rhythm section throughout this entire album is really strong as well. My background, I'm not very good, but my background is with drums, and so I always kind of gravitate towards that. I thought the drums were fantastic on this album.
I'm glad to hear you say that, because I think Alex, I mean, as honestly, a lot of people that I know who know his drumming, he's one of the greats in my opinion. He has a really beautiful voice on the instrument, and is also just like kind of explosive. So thanks for seeing that.
I'm always drawn to that, but also, I mean, again, I think the guitar work is fantastic.
Thank you.
So I know every artist kind of approaches songwriting a little bit differently. How do you start your process? Do you go like lyrics first and then kind of set a melody to that, or is it kind of vice versa, where you kind of start from the guitar since that's your main background and build out from there?
Totally. I would say on this record, and most generally, because I think guitar, I've said before that the guitar is kind of my window into music, or has been historically. Because I'm becoming more of a singer as time goes on, and more of a lyricist, I think, as time goes on, just in terms of my interests, honestly, it's starting to change. I've noticed that, but particularly for this record, and again, more often than not, it's when I'm practicing guitar, or I'm, you know, it's those moments of like productive procrastinations where you get that little like bend in space time a little bit, and like there's that little dream space happens, and I like play something by accident, or something catches my ear, and I'm like, oh, there's a whole world there. I feel like a lot of those songs came out of that kind of experience that I have on the guitar from time to time, where I'll just be doing something, or I'll be distracted by something, and something really catches my heart and my ear, and I'm like, I have to see that through. That's usually where it begins. And then melody, lyric will come last generally, but again, I'm noticing it start to shift for me. Well, now I'll be like, I want to get that lyric a lyric might come to me, or I might hear a melody before harmony, but that's the general scheme, I'd say.
Cool. So a little bit of mix of everything, and as you develop as a singer and you start focus on that, you kind of find yourself getting maybe little snippets here and there. That's really cool, man. So on the songwriting too, there's a lot of risk taken on this album. One of the reasons that I'm so drawn to it is I love like experimental music, I love psychedelic music, and you could hear that influence throughout, but it's not so like polarizing that you're shying away from fans who might be more into like traditional pop structure. And I'd say, how does improvisation kind of affect your songwriting process, where you want to create something that's unique and, a little bit more cutting edge, while still trying to appeal to like the general music population?
Yeah, and also I think what's coming to my mind is also just like pleasing myself. Honestly, I love experimental music. Again, spending years in New York, I've become very adjacent to jazz scenes, but also noise scenes, and all experimental music in general, and but also I just love songwriting. I grew up obsessed with the Beatles, like as you probably can hear through the record a little bit.
Just a little bit.
I'm not that shy about it because I'm like, I love the Beatles partially because I feel like they also were comfortable and in a very playful way exploring all of the things that were interesting to them. So,
Definitely. I think the Beatles, and this is something that I argue with my friends all the time, they were so influential on so many different like aspects of pop and rock music now, and
totally.
it's impossible to not hear their influence on almost like every modern like
Oh
pop
yeah,
or rock album.
totally, totally. I feel the same way, and I often am on that side of the conversation as well. But yeah, so I guess I felt like when I get to make my own music, and again when I have such a close collaborator in Chris and being able to flesh it out, I get it was an opportunity to just kind of say yes to everything that I wanted to hear or tickled me or I thought was like entertaining. And sometimes it's not the most experimental idea, it's just giving the thing down the middle that I want to hear too. And I think one other thing I would say is because there's a little bit of a concept to the record in terms of like the experience of um, grief and going through these kind of intense transitions in life
Yeah.
where you are, I think for me, and I hear it when I listen to the record, that there can be moments of such like confusion. And in some ways, I feel like I went to psychedelia often and experimentation to express what it can be like when you are lost or what it can be like when you're searching or what that feels like. I think that connected to me, but then at the same time going through those processes and grief as a general umbrella kind of comes to my mind. You have those moments where you get intense clarity almost from above or from within or from a different place, and sometimes those moments of clarity of knowingness feel like they need to be expressed in really clear terms. So I felt that in my songwriting process, and it would often come through just the emotional experience. But I hear that when I listen to the record, I'm like, that's always that dynamic is happening a lot. And yeah, it was intentional and also just kind of happened.
Yeah, I mean, I was just looking at my notes from my review that I did of it right here, and I mean, you can definitely get that on the entire album, but especially on the title track of Another Life. I mean, the
Yeah.
lyrical content on that one, I remember the first time hearing it, like, felt compounding emotions of both grief and like acceptance, and it's a really beautiful song. So it came
Thank
through
you.
very clearly.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I sometimes when I play it live, I share the story of how in writing that song, I started, I didn't know what was going to happen, obviously, as writing goes, but I started in that original place of, it's kind of jealousy adjacent. It's like there's a despair, a real despair going on. But in the process of writing and kind of accepting that, it brought me to those choruses, which are really from a very different kind of disposition. So totally.
Yeah. That kind of leads perfectly into my next question, where
Yeah.
I think there's certain artists that like really need to be seen live to be fully appreciated. I don't necessarily get that fully with this album, but I do feel like there's a couple songs that really, really should be seen live and feel like they do really well in a live setting. How much of that like kind of went into your writing process as well, where you were thinking about like potentially like playing around on stage, doing some more improvisation, or just writing something for an album?
Totally. Well, I have a question for you, but I'll answer the question first, which is that, yeah, like, yes, I would say there are a couple of things I guess I would say there. One, I grew up playing very improvisational music. So the blues guitar was my formative like musical experience basically with the guitar. And I was deeply obsessed as a very young person. And so I really, in some ways, that's like central to just the way that I make music because that's all it was for me for years. That it was like the point was to be able to say something improvisationally. And then I, got into jazz more. And so it really stayed the course in kind of improvisational styles until my 20s when I was like, I also love songs and I want to write songs. And that like started to happen. So that dynamic is very, I think as time goes on, I'm still very interested in it. And live music is such an amazing opportunity to be able to do both truly. And that I think the live shows that I've been playing recently, especially with a band, showcase that. And in terms of writing the record, I think that I've always loved, and it reflects my work with Bartiz too, as music director and stuff like that, where I love arranging live music. And I think part of some of the choices for recording the record, we had to say no to a few ideas that were really live ideas. So, but I think there's something about that influence that did make its way onto the record. Just how we lock certain arrangement ideas are the bass and the drums and the guitar are agreeing on certain things and lining up in certain ways that do translate live, in my opinion, because it was almost part of its intention, I think, originally, because live music has been such an experiment, part of my musical experience.
Yeah, totally. You did said you have a question for me, so I'll let you
I was
that
just
now if you want.
Yeah, I appreciate it. You said that there were certain tracks that felt like that you felt you'd be curious to hear them live, and I'm curious if you know what those were.
Yeah, so specifically She'll Be part 1 and part 2, I think those both would translate really well live. And then I would have to say it's probably my favorite song on the album, and it feels like it's just meant for like a festival, but in Compromised Positions, which is it's just such a good song, and I
Thank
would
you.
love to experience that live at some point. Whenever you make your way to Colorado, let me know.
Oh, I will. I will definitely let you know. My sister lived in Colorado for a bit, but yeah, the interesting thing with She'll Be Part 2, where the kind of solo happens, is that which is one of my favorite guitar production moments I've had up to this point in my life. It's reverse guitar, and
Okay.
so which is why it sounds so classically psychedelic. But it was a collaboration with Chris Connors and I, where we basically went bar. I took a solo or a bunch of passes, a bunch of solos, and then we took our favorite phrases and we flipped them. We reversed the sound of them, but we went bar by bar so that it stayed with the harmony, with the chords, because the song changes key. I mean, the chord progression changes key, so you can't just kind of live in one place. You had to follow the changes. Anyway, it was a really cool. To me, it was a really cool procedure to get that result. When we do it live, it's very different because I just improvise.
Yeah.
I just improvise, and it's not reversed. Maybe one day I'll figure out how to do that, but I just play, and it's a moment where it does. I do love the freedom of being locked into song and then just engaging with my friends and my bandmates to let it fly as much as possible. We also do a couple of. I'll just say real quickly on She'll Be Part 2. We do a live arrangement that we decided not to do on the record because it felt more like a live arrangement. So one day, hopefully, you'll see that.
I'm sure I will. Yeah, I mean, part 2 especially definitely feels like it could be stretched out an extra few minutes and you could really have fun with it on stage.
Exactly.
All right, cool. Next question, just about like the songwriting process as well. And this is kind of a question I ask anyone that I know in my personal life that has written music before. And that's just, there's so much music out there, right?
Yeah.
And especially if you're like a lover of music and you grew up listening to it and you obsess over it like I do, it's hard not to find yourself bringing in elements of your favorite stuff when you're like trying to do the writing process. How do you try and keep away from potentially borrowing ideas accidentally of music that you grew up loving?
Yeah, I think this is an interesting one because I think of I think it's the Picasso quote about great artists steal,
Yeah.
like good artists borrow, great artists steal, or something. And I think the easy thing is, and I definitely did it throughout the Another Life record, where I was like, I'm not shy about being like, I want it to sound like this. I'm really
Yeah.
inspired by this, because I know when I go for something, I'll fail to get there. That is like guaranteed. I'll never, especially just because the material, everything's different. All the raw ingredients are always like pretty different. So when you actually go for something, you end up getting something else. And I love that process. The most dangerous moments are the more subconscious ones,
Yeah.
where, to me, where I'm writing something, and I think when writing feels really transcendent, it feels like it's coming from some weird part of your memory often. And then that becomes like, I've written things where I'm like, is this something, or is this just something? You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And that there are things that I haven't recorded that I'm like, I hope that's not anything, because I haven't figured it out yet, but it feels so familiar to me. But part of that feeling is why I want to, chase it. So it's an interesting thing also, because I'll just say really briefly, like, I think it's one of the flaws, the inherent flaws of the whole, or like, individualism, original music, copyright, capitalism's thing, because inherently it's kind of a lie. Because we're rinsing and repeating, like, a lot of the same stuff, or at least what we've heard. That's just like part of the process. So I'm always interested in that kind of just like false reality we have to like play by.
That's totally fair. I mean, you did manage to make an album that sounded wholly unique and familiar at the same time, which I think is very difficult to do. One of my favorite quotes, and I'm probably misquoting this directly, but I know someone who's been talked a lot in the past, like probably 5 to 6 years, in regards to this, is Olivia Rodrigo. And
Yeah.
someone brought up, I think it was like she, had to pay royalties to Elvis Costello, and then someone asked Elvis Costello like what he thought of that. He was like, I think it's great that she's, taking inspiration for that. She probably didn't do it consciously, but there's so much music out there that we're all going to kind of regurgitate each other's ideas at some point. So,
Totally.
cool, man. Well, last few questions here for
Yeah.
you. These are all ones that I kind of just want to have some fun with. So,
Sure.
you've clearly played in a lot of live shows. You've toured around with some big acts. What is like your favorite venue that you've ever performed live in? Like, is there one that just really sticks out to you that like you'd go back to over and over again, no matter what?
Well, I think the interesting thing here is that a lot of the most magical shows are in the places that would surprise you, or I think of like my college band driving up to Marlborough College in the middle of Vermont, or the middle of southern Vermont, like playing at an A-frame in the snowstorm, and it was like unforgettable. Or like the other day, with my band, I played at a venue or it's a motel called Taurus in North Adams, Massachusetts, that has music, and not a traditional venue, but it was like in a very special show, and it sounded really good. I think with my touring life, oftentimes the venues that I would be like, I can't believe I get to play here, this is such a bucket list item, would be disappointing, not because the venue disappointed, but because I put so much pressure on myself to like live up to the standard or something. It would always get a little complicated, with one exception that really comes to my mind, which was Newport Folk Festival.
Okay.
I did that with Bartiz, and it was one of the rare ones where it was like, I felt like we played a very special show. And I remember walking out underneath that tent, and I was just like, this is crazy.
Yeah.
I just felt like it was an arrival. It was that rare feeling of like things landed into place in the special place. So that would take the cake probably at the moment. I also think of like the first festival we played on in the first run, which was at the Pitchfork Music Festival of Chicago. And, those first experiences are unforgettable. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, Newport Folk Festival has been on my bucket list for a while, and it's it's funny living in Colorado. We have probably what like a lot of people would consider a destination venue in Red Rocks,
which I
and
haven't played yet.
I've got a lot of like gone to a lot of shows there, and I always find like the bands that talk too much about the fact that they're playing Red Rocks, it just takes away from the experience. It's like,
Mhm.
just focus on putting on a good show. Don't put that pressure on yourself, and you're gonna have
Yes.
a good time.
That
So,
makes total sense to me. That makes total sense to me. You want the show to transcend the venue sometimes,
yeah,
actually.
definitely.
Yeah.
Cool, man. So, who are some of your influences, would you say, when it comes to like your playing style is concerned? And is there like a guitarist that you feel is just like severely underrated and doesn't get enough attention and discussion when people generally try and like have this conversation?
Yeah, I mean that's one. I'll go there first because I'm like I should. I feel like I should have like a whole list here, especially because at a certain point in my guitar playing life and just musical life, when I would see those lists, the top 100 guitar players, I was like, this is a joke. Not that those players are like bad or anything, but I'm like, this is eliminate the world of guitar is large. It is way bigger than those lists always make it seem. And I'm like, from my standpoint, in my teenage and like early 20s, I would say jazz musicians blew my mind so consistently that I couldn't believe that the top 10 wasn't like just, these jazz guitar players who were doing things I couldn't believe. Um, but now I'm just like, the more I think social media has done this too, I just see the guitar players playing all around the world that do just unbelievable things. So I did think though just of a recent experience I had in New York, which is just filled with amazing voices. And I heard this young guitar player named Tim Watson who was playing with a friend of mine, and it was probably the last time that I had a guitar player just totally blow my mind. I was just like, it was so, I was hearing such fresh ideas, and I was really inspired by it. It was like really amazing. But yeah, too many people to name. I think going back to your original question though of influences, like again, I was super into the blues, so it was like BB, Freddie, and Albert King, huge. Stevie Ray Vaughan was huge for me, no doubt about it. I was obsessed with his phrasing. Um, I felt like, this has stayed with me. I feel like, which is that I felt like Stevie never compromised anything for the phrase. The phrase was king, so to speak.
Yeah.
And it's the same with the other players, but I felt it very clearly that he valued that so much, and I still feel that way for myself. It's like the only thing I really care about is like the integrity of the phrase. And then I think more recently, Julian Lage is like always constant inspiration. Blake Mills is always constant inspiration. I think Charlie Hunter is underrated in some ways, even though he's also rated,
Yeah.
just because it's pretty just ridiculous. And I think of Ella Feingold too. Do you know Ella
I'm not
Feingold?
familiar with her, no.
Um, she's great. She also is a really beautiful sharer and educator on Instagram. And she has been just every time I see her stuff, it reminds me of how groove is the only thing that matters. And because I'm like, once that's where the phrasing comes from, I'm like, it has been, I've really like appreciated that like constant reminder from her page. And she's like extremely good. um so yeah, those are some people that I think come to my mind from the guitar stuff.
Cool, man. Yeah, Steve, I 100% agree with Stevie. He would be like my answer to the question of who I feel like isn't talked about enough, or is again, obviously he's not underrated for people that like know music, but
Yeah.
I every time I bring up this conversation with friends of mine that are really more into like traditional rock and don't listen to a lot of blues, his name never gets mentioned, and it's a crime. So,
Oh yeah,
um,
he was still actually in my childhood bedroom kind of like shifted in my family's place. I have like the biggest poster of Stevie Ray Vaughan you've ever seen.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
meant a
All
lot
right,
to me.
last couple of questions here.
Oh,
Um, Can you give me just, one or maybe like two albums that you think that everyone should listen to at least once in their life?
Yeah. This is probably the hardest question.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Not like your favorite, not like a
Yeah.
top album, just
The
one you think like should be on the bucket list for anyone that appreciates music.
So yeah, the one that came to my mind, because I thought about, I am going to give you just a brief, like whatever comes to my mind right now.
Sure.
But one that does, when I think about when I just need to like get in touch with music, or or I need music, often I will go to this Thomas Mapfumo record called Mabasa. Um, it I think for other people there might be other records in the sound, but his blend of, I guess it's his like Shona culture, and it was a fusion with like other styles, more kind of uh global styles, with this Shona culture, which is like Mbira, a lot of Mbira based on piano stuff with electric guitar. It just gets to the heart of things in this way. And I don't know I know what they're singing about, but I don't know the language. So it just cuts right to like the center of life often. I feel that. So that is what actually comes to my mind. But other records, like with the Beatles, I go between Abbey Road and the White Album. I That's a hard one for me. It used to be Abbey Road. Now I'm like, I'm not sure. Maybe it's the White Album.
Oh, Darling was my wedding song. So
beautiful.
I always kind of gravitate towards Abbey Road. As well, I'm not familiar with the album that you mentioned. I'm going to have to check it out. But someone that I feel is similar that I've been really into recently is I think it's Mdu Mokhtar. I think is how you pronounce his name.
Yeah.
An African musician from Nigeria who, same thing, blends like world and like his kind of local style of music with blues, and he's an incredible guitarist.
Yeah, is that I thought that he was from Mali, but we should check on that, because that has also like this really interesting, what to our ear is like blues tradition. I love that music. Thomas Mapfumo is Zimbabwe, very much Zimbabwe music, and there's a whole rabbit hole there that I definitely recommend. I'll just say a couple others though. It's like the Royal Scam, Steely Dan, big one for me. Yep. I also think a modern classic that definitely influenced my record was Sound and Color by the Alabama Shakes.
Oh, that's such a good album.
Every time I hear that, I'm like, yeah, it's as good as I remember it.
Yeah, Freddie Howard is a modern genius. I mean, that album in particular, they're playing Red Rocks on my birthday, and I haven't seen him yet. So
yeah, you got to do it.
I think that's probably what I'm going to be doing for my birthday this year. But yeah, fantastic album.
King of Limbs, Radiohead. I'm a King of Limbs guy. I'll say one more, which is Journey in Satchidananda by Alice Coltrane.
Okay. I
gave more than one.
I keep meaning to give King of Limbs another listen. I've done it a couple times, and I've never been able to truly get into it. But I'll give it one more try.
Have you ever listened to the In the Basement versions?
I haven't. No.
I would actually start there if the album didn't grab you. I think the live version might be a way in. It kind of was mine years ago.
Cool. All right, man. Last question for you.
All right.
To go. What's next, man? I know you just dropped this album, about a month ago. I'm sure you've got some live performances coming up in your neck of the woods, but what can we expect next from Mr. Dan Kleederman?
Yeah, I appreciate it. I'm excited and also feel like I have a lot of work to do, which is good and normal. Just because I was very focused on kind of releasing the record, and now there's so much more stuff to do to get the record out, which is very much part of the reason why, I'm here in front of you. But so I appreciate it as well. So I'm going to try to book, I am playing in New York. I'm playing in, mid-May with a friend, Ben Saratin, who's a really great artist as well, in Ridgewood, Queens, playing on that bill. And I have some other gigs, but I'm trying to book a tour sometime later this year, and I'm going to try to get on it soon. It's been really cool to see people connecting with this record, and it has inspired me to be like, I want to continue to see who else wants to hear it, and also would then, you know, enjoy seeing the live thing, which to your point from earlier is a different thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm feeling inspired to keep it moving forward.
Cool, man. Well, I can't wait to see what you do next. Another Life out now. Everyone go check it out. It's available on all streaming services. Do you have any like physical media copies of it?
I have cassettes. Highly recommend.
All right.
So on my Bandcamp, you can get them on my Bandcamp.
All right. Go check out his Bandcamp. Daniel Kleederman, thank you so much for being here, man. Really appreciate your time. And you know, again, we'll see what's coming down the pipeline for you.
I appreciate it. Great to talk to you. Thanks for having me.